Without further ado, let us continue with the next session. Today we have invited special guests from University of Science Malaysia to give a talk on urban poverty, realities and perspective on Islamic management of poverty. With that, I would like to invite Prof. Dr. Muhammad Shukri Saleh, and I will pass the floor to the moderator.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I proceed, let me check with audience, particularly those who are online, whether you are able to hear me well. Can you? Okay, thank you, Professor Shukran. Honorable Dean of the Abdul Hamid Abu Sulayman, Kulliyyah of Islamic Arabic Knowledge and Human Sciences, Professor Dr. Shukran Abdul Rahman, the head of Department of Sociology and Anthropology, Associate Professor Dr. Haiza Rukis, our respected invited speaker, Professor Dr. Muhammad Shukri Saleh, from University of Science Malaysia, my colleagues in the department, officers, brothers and sisters, students, undergraduate and postgraduate, ladies and gentlemen. Let us first of all express our gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. For only by His grace and mercy we are able to be here today in this very important session in which we are going to be exposed to the ideas that are related more to development and social change with special focus on poverty from both conventional and also Islamic perspective. For the information of the speaker, we are having today, this morning of Friday, what we call SOCA Interactive Day. This is the program that we hold semesterly, every semester, involving all students. So today we have at the other venue that is in the big hall, more than 300 students, and also the staff who are following this, as well as other invited guests. And this program normally will involve the academic staff as well as the alumni, and we interact with each other in order to know more about each other, as well as the businesses that we are having with us, how best we can deal with this matter. For this semester, in addition to this, we have thought that there should be a kind of program as part of this program that will also be a session for knowledge increment. And therefore, we have planned that the series that we actually planned earlier before COVID-19 pandemic to fall on the same day. So in addition to this, therefore, I would like to mention that we, Department of Sociology and Anthropology, is planning to have a series of sessions on urban poverty. And this will be held online. And we start today with the first series. And even though we have focused on urban poverty, but to start with, we would like to expose our students and academic staff to a kind of introductory session whereby we talk about poverty, but from Islamic perspective. And today, we have therefore with us an expert in this area, that is Professor Dr. Muhammad Shukri Saleh. So before we invite, or I invite him to share his knowledge, experiences, and thoughts, let me introduce you to him, although I believe Dr. Shukri needs no introduction to some of you. Professor Dr. Muhammad Shukri Saleh, or Muhammad Sakri, or Shukri bin Saleh, holds a Bachelor of Social Sciences honors in Rural Studies from University Science Malaysia. He also has a diploma in economics and also a Master of Arts in Rural Development from University of East Anglia, United Kingdom, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Islamic-based development from University of Oxford, United Kingdom. He is currently an honorary professor of Islamic Development Management, Center for Islamic Development Management Studies, or ISDEC, of the University Science Malaysia. He was the founder of this center and also director of this center. Currently, he is also an adjunct professor of the Faculty of Islamic Development Management at University Islam Sultan Sharif Ali, UNISA, Negara Brunei Darussalam, as well as an adjunct professor in the Schools of Art, Humanities and Social Sciences, Asia E-University, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He has been appointed by 18 universities and academic institutions in 7 countries, including Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Japan, United Kingdom, Negara Brunei Darussalam, and Indonesia. As adjunct professor, also visiting professor, honorary fellow, visiting fellow, visiting scholar, and faculty member of all these institutions. He has a total of about 236 publications in the form of books, e-books, chapters in books, journal articles, review articles, popular articles, and so on to his credit. And he has served as International Advisory Council Chairman of Advisory Board, Reviewer Board, and Editorial Board of 17 national and international academic journals. He has also delivered a total of about 360 keynote addresses, academic solicited talks, and working papers at various academic meetings nationally and internationally. He has undertaken 59 national and international research and consultancy projects, especially in Malaysia, Negara Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, and Vietnam, and associated with 14 professional bodies in United Kingdom, United States of America, Canada, the Netherlands, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Thailand. I think with this, actually not so long introduction, because he has a lengthy CV. If I were to read, maybe half of the time that we allocate today will be taken up by his CV. So, but however, I would hope that with this brief introduction of the speaker, you can have an impression of who is he as an expert in his area. And today we are fortunate to have him with us. And without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Shukri to share with us his thoughts, ideas, and experiences, and to set a kind of direction for us. We hope to hear from him. What do we mean by Islamic management of poverty, and even what is meant by poverty from perhaps conventional and Islamic perspective, as well as for him to also connect us to the subsequent series in this series on urban poverty, that is to connect to the issues on urban poverty at the end of his presentation. So with that, Prof, I humbly invite you to speak on this topic. We have, I think, until 10:45. So I will allow you to present a part of this or utilize part of this time for presentation. And later, if we are left with some more time, then that can be utilized for question and answer. So, تفضل مشكورة, Professor.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم أستغفر الله العظيم أستغفر الله العظيم أستغفر الله العظيم. Thank you very much, my respected brother, Dr. Associate Professor, Dr. Azizan Matnon, my brother, Professor Shukri Abdul Rahman, the Dean of the Islamic Review Knowledge and Human Sciences, the Kulliyyah of Islamic Review Knowledge and Human Sciences, Associate Professor Dr. Rohaiza Rokesh, the heads of the SOCA, School of Anthropology and
Sociology and Anthropology. Sociology and Anthropology.
Yeah, Sociology, Anthropology, sorry for that. All right, Alhamdulillah, thank you very much for inviting me here to be together, inshallah. I'll share a little bit of my experience on poverty, inshallah. And let me share my PowerPoint. Boleh nampak ke Dr. Hazizan?
Yeah, boleh, Prof. Boleh.
Yeah, all right,
yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
So the title of my presentation is Islamic Management of Poverty. It's very simple, and probably one wonders why management and not the usual poverty alleviation or elimination. Yeah, I use management rather than poverty alleviation or elimination because from my little knowledge of the history of human beings, I have yet to see any periods in the history of human beings that has not got any poor people. Yeah, and poverty has always been there from the beginnings of the history of the human beings until now. And therefore, I think it's not the problems of alleviating the poverty or eliminating the poverty, which is quite impossible actually. And definitely you can alleviate poverty just to decrease it or to overcome the issues and all that. But then elimination is quite impossible. And if we use the words elimination for poverty, I think we are so ambitious, so ambitious. So what we need to do is to manage the poverty, and I will explain the elements of it nanti inshallah. And I think therefore in handling the problems, the issues of poverty in whatever kind, the urban poverty or rural poverty or anything, and then we have to have this fundamental mechanism, meaning that we are the managers of overcoming the problems of poverty. So this presentation, inshallah, is very simple. I hope to provide brothers and sisters with a big picture of the issues of poverty, the management of poverty, and then we'll go into the fundamental framework in handling the urban poverty in this case. Yeah, in this case, I'm not going to discuss on urban poverty, but then I'm providing a kind of fundamental framework so that if it is suitable, you can always use this this framework to think of how to overcome the problems of urban poverty. I'm going to discuss specifically 4 things. Number 1 is to have a fair treatment of poverty, treatment to poverty. And number 2, we have to find the right definition of poverty. especially from Islamic perspective. And number three, we have to have the right identification mechanisms of the poor. And lastly, is the effective approach to poverty management. Yeah, let's begin with a little bit of history. Let's see the conventional approach to poverty alleviation. They use the word alleviation at the management, and I call it a tangible centered approach to poverty alleviation. Why? Because all along from 1950s, we are talking about the approach from the 1950s, yeah, after the Second World War until now, and not before that. What they have been done so far, I think all are dealing with tangible factors, and not much or almost not at all dealing with intangible factors. So for instance, in the 1950s and 1960s, they were trying to have a growth in gross domestic product in view that and the hopes that trickle-down effect will happen to the poor, will go to the poor, but that was much to be desired. Yeah, and in 1970s, they were thinking about provision of nutritional, health, and educational, the shift a little bit, to fulfill the needs of the poor in nutrition, in health, and also in education. But that was not sustainable also in the long run, because it puts a very heavy burden on the government budgets. Yeah, and in the 1980s and 1990s, we witnessed a kind of focus on the labor intensive, increasing the investment in human capital information. But it was found that it is also difficult because it requires more public spending and involves the trade-off between the interests of the poor and the non-poor. Yeah, and usually the poor are the vulnerable parties as opposed to the non-poor. And also there were mismanagement of public funds and corruption. And this hasn't stopped until now. Yeah, and in the 2000s, yeah, they move a little bit into, yeah, if you can say intangible. I'm not too sure about that. The opportunities, is it tangible or intangible? But they now shift to concentrate on opportunities of the poor, the empowerment of the poor, and the securities of the poor. Meaning that they try as much as possible to involve the poor, to improve the poor in decision making, and also to improve the governance of public funds and protection of the poor from economic and natural shocks through public policies. So public policies is also involved in this. But after that, post 2000s, we can see the trend is moving towards what they call a sustainable development. And they have a special sustainable development goals, which involve social, economics, and environmental aspects of development. And that includes also the alleviations of poverty, the alleviation of hunger, and so forth. And but it's very interesting nowadays. There are also a kind of approach which try to have a holistic approach to poverty. And they set up, it begins from Oxford University up here, and then accepted by United Nations. They set up an index, yeah, to measure the poverty, and to measure the poor by using what they claim as multi-dimensional poverty index. That includes three main things. There is health, education, and standard of living. This is a brief, the brief history of the approaches of the conventional approach to poverty. Let's see the contemporary Islamic scholars' approach to poverty alleviation. So, alhamdulillah, our Islamic scholars, brothers and sisters, have not been backward in thinking how to handle the poverty. And all in all, we can say that they try to adopt two kinds of approach. Yeah? Number one, which probably we can call the economic approach. That economic approach, the mechanisms, the operational mechanisms of the Western ethnocentric, which refer to conventional approach to poverty just now, it's quite the same. Yeah? They are talking about economic growth. They are talking about the distribution of income. Yeah, they are talking about effective growth with inequitable, with a built-in equitable opportunity mechanism. And they try to empower the young people to be the productive workforce by using a capital formation, job creation, finance, and secure environment. So if we see it from that operational mechanism of the poverty elevation suggested by contemporary Islamic scholars, is quite similar to the conventional ones, but there are also injections of Islamic elements in that. Yeah, say for instance, they were using Naqvi's axiomatic approach, which includes unity, equilibrium, free will, responsibility, and all that. And so it's a kind of, to some extent, there was a kind of trying to overcome the problems of poverty within the framework of the Western ethnocentric setup, and then injecting the Islamic elements into it. So we can always see that. I think most of our Islamic scholars from economics discipline, and therefore it is not wonder that the approach is more on the economics rather than on anything else. But the second approach, institutional approach, which we can call institutional approach also has been taken up by our Islamic scholars, who are also the Islamic economists using the economic approach by trying to elevate poverty using Islamic institutions such as zakat, wakaf, takaful, and infaq, sadakat, also hibah, given and microcredit, microfinance, and so forth. In doing this, we can see that there is a trade-off between the interests of the haves and the have-nots. So they're trying to overcome their problems by having a resource sharing system. And then they're also aware of the role of public sector, which is versus the role of the market. And that's why they use the Islamic institution to achieve also the redistributive goals. Yeah, all right. This is very simply the approaches that have been used by our contemporary Islamic scholars. But let's see. If you were to adopt an Islamic management of poverty, are they right? I think in order to know that, we can at least see 4 issues. Yeah. Number 1 is the perceptions of poverty. Number 2, whose definition of poverty. Number 3 is the identifications of the poor. Number 4, the approaches to the management of poverty. So now let's discuss this one by one, inshallah. Yeah. From my readings, I haven't has yet to find any writings that is pro-poverty. And almost all of the writings, all of research, all the Islamic scholars' ideas, they are against poverty. So in fact, they allege that the poverty will entail with social and ideological evil, yeah, degrade societal status of the vagrants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, entails with many social problems, social ill, social time bomb, threat to humans' belief, disrupting humans' dignity, incapacity, helplessness, dependence, social imbalance, endanger the security and stability of the society. Yeah, and then they were saying that poverty puts the poor nations at a disadvantaged position in the world society of human race. We can agree with that, with all of that, but I think we need to contemplate a little bit more by looking at the history of Islam. Say, for instance, at least there are four things that wonder me. And number one, during the times of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we witnessed the existence of a group of Sahaba by the names of Ahli Sufa, who remains poor, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never asked them to work or to be rich. Does it mean that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed them to be poor and therefore allow the existence of poverty in human beings, in human life? That is the question. Number two, we also read how Sayyidina Abdul bin Auf, who was very rich and would like to be poor, but it was prohibited by Allah, by Rasulullah SAW. So Allah was saying that you be a rich man rather than a poor man. And then we also read the story of an Ansar who came to Rasulullah SAW to ask for something for his subsistence, and Rasulullah sold the belongings of the Ansar, auction them, and take the money, give a part to eat, to fulfill the needs of the Ansar, and the other half used to buy an eggs and ask the Ansar to go and work. So meaning that Rasulullah SAW asked the Ansar to work, as opposed to Ali Sufa, who remains poor, and Rasulullah never asked them to work. And we have also a story of Thalaba. Actually, this story has quite people are having different opinions on that, this Thalaba, whether this is true or not. But if we just, for the sake of our thinking, we were told that Thalaba was a very poor Sahaba. He came to Rasulullah SAW, asking Rasulullah to do the dua for him to be rich. Rasulullah refused it until 3 times. And then Rasulullah reluctantly prayed for him. Then eventually he became rich. So you can see in these 4 cases, we wonder why Rasulullah SAW looks like allowing Ali Sufa to remain poor, but then prohibited Sayyidina Abdul bin Auf to be poor, and asked the Ansar to work, and prohibited Salaba, not blessed. Rasulullah was did not bless the Salaba to be rich. So it seems like rich or poverty, rich or poor, is a kind of a selective things, yeah. But if you see, so for instance, let's read Abu Hurairah hadith. The hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The poor Muslim will enter paradise before the rich by half a day. Before the rich by half a day, the length of which is 500 years." So we can see that in the poor Muslims, you can see there is an advantage to be poor in such a way. But definitely the tafsir, the Mufassirin was saying that actually it's not the status, whether they are poor or rich, but it is more of because of the righteousness, because of their iman and taqwa, irrespective whether they are poor or rich. But then the poor will go in the paradise earlier because they don't have much things to be hisab, yeah, to be hisab, and then so actually because of the righteousness with iman and taqwa, along with the poverty, and not merely because of poverty. But then we can come to the conclusions, yeah. We can ask the conclusion whether poverty is selective, yeah. And then here in the conventional, also our Islamic scholars' opinions of poverty, they miss one important dimension, which is spirituality. No doubt that some of our Islamic scholars were discussing about spirituality. It's not really discussing, but only mentioning about spirituality, and the necessity of spirituality in doing things, but they don't explain. what is spirituality in detail and to relate that to the management of poverty. And one interesting thing that I found, there is a concept by Imam Ghazali. The concept is absolute fakir, fakir mutlaq, fakir mutlaq. And then I found in the Quran regarding Qarun. Qarun was saying, when people were asking how he got rich, and he was saying, I'm in no need to Allah. This is mine, not Allah's. And these riches were given to me on account of the knowledge I possess. So Allah is not in his mind. He doesn't need Allah. And for Imam Ghazali, whoever who do not need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can categorize them into the absolute fakir, even though they are rich. And this also, I think, will determine our management of poverty, our handling of poverty. Yeah, and alhamdulillah, you want to study about poverty, and especially urban poverty. I think these three things have to be looked into, and I'm looking forward to see the results of it. Yeah? Whether poverty is selective, why some people are allowed to be poor, and why some people are allowed to be rich and not to be the poor, and all that, yeah, inshallah. So that's the first issue. Second issue, whose definition of poverty? Whose definition of poverty? From my readings, from my study, and we can see that actually the definition of poverty is the Western ethnocentric definition. So that includes also in Islamic writings on poverty. They use the undefined conventional poverty, not an Islamically defined poverty, which includes the exclusions of spiritual dimension. So they were using the indicators like growth, market, income, wealth, employment, capital, asset, revenues, profit, purchasing power, this ability to buy goods and services, to fulfill minimum basic needs for economically decent living, and all are tangible indicators used by conventional economics, dominated by Western ethnocentric definition. And then in fact, there are people who are saying that poverty in its pure meaning is the insufficiency and the lack of material means to live a tolerable and meaningful existence. These quotations comes from an Islamic scholar who writes on poverty. So brothers and sisters, we can see that actually we are still entangled with the Western ethnocentric thinkings of poverty of the poor, using the Western ethnocentric elements, indicators to determine whether one is poor or not. And it's quite interesting also nowadays, there are a lot of people who are advocating the realizations of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and then through Islamic elements like zakat. So there are people who are using zakat to overcome the problems of poverty according to the goals that have been set up by United Nations. By the United Nations. And whether they are successful or not, it depends on the indicators, the Western ethnocentric definition. So zakat is an Islamic institution, but the definition of poverty is a Western ethnocentric definition. And the determinants of the success is also measured by the Western perspective rather than by Islamic perspective. And I think it will be a different kind of definition of poverty if we include spirituality into the definition of poverty. It will entail with different kind of categories of the poor, for instance. Because when you talk about spirituality, we're talking about our nafs, our mazmuma, the bad attitudes, the bad deeds of human beings. That stimulates the urge to consume, to maximize the consumption, and also having unlimited wants to fulfill the unlimited wants, and always feel inadequacy, in a state of inadequacy. So not enough. They want more and more and more. But then there are also nafs in ourselves which is called Mahmudah, the good nafs, which stimulates consumption according to needs rather than wants. This is the real ones. Yeah, actually, we need to base our consumption on needs rather than wants, and always feel having a feeling of adequacy and satisfied. In Arab, they say kana'ah. Yeah. So the determinant factors whether they are poor or not is iman and taqwa, and we cannot put aside these factors and the soul. So if you were to put into table, you can see the tables, the categories 1, 2, or 3, and then in fact we can categorize the poor. Number one, who are having rich soul and rich wealth, and this is the most commendable category that we should produce as many as possible. And the group number 2 is rich in soul but then poor in wealth. This kind of people, this group, we can allow them to exist because they're not able, they're able to live without burdening the state and the society, because they feel satisfied with themselves, they feel adequate with whatever that they have. So no problems with this one. The third category is those who are poor in soul and poor in wealth. This is the most problematic, the most negative category, and the most needing helps. We should concentrate on this. Substantial part of the state's allocations will be allocated for them. And the fourth one is the poor in soul, rich in wealth. This is second most negative category, and definitely substantial parts of the state's allocation should also be allocated to them despite of their richness. Even though they are rich, allocation must be allocated to them, to the rich, so as to allow them to increase the richness of their soul, and then entail with the kind of generous, rich, who can benefit the states and the society as a whole. So if you can see this, we can identify the categories of the poor and can put the priority on which group they are going to concentrate on. So you can see that the most group that we must concentrate is group number 3. Yeah, and the second one is the group number 2, meaning that in trying to manage the poverty, it is not the poor that we need to help them, but also the rich. Yeah? So we have to prescribe the mechanism for both the poor groups and the rich. Normally, in the treatments of poverty, we can see that many people, and in fact, almost of any efforts on handling the poverty, they concentrate just on the poor, but not on the rich. Number 3 is group number 2. They are okay. They are quite okay. They don't disturb society. They don't break up the bad consequences that have been alleged by many conventional and also Islamic scholars. So they are fine. And the fourth one is the rich and the rich. They are okay. And that's what the groups that we need to produce more. All right. So that's the second issue. The third issue, who identify the poor? Yeah, who identify the poor? You can see that actually it's not the poor who identify themselves as poor. Yeah, there are people from outside, such as policymakers, development agencies, poverty alleviation authorities, academicians like us, researchers like us, who are identifying the poor according to the definition of poverty that we have discussed just now. And then it's hardly that we can see any party who seek to have the answer from the poor's perception of poverty. How do the poor perceive the poverty? And moreover, what is the poor's perceptions of themselves? Are they consider themselves as poor, or are they consider themselves as rich? I've had a little experience on this. Yeah, we have we undertook a research in the States. We took the list of the poor from the authorities, and then we go to some of them, try to get more information on them. One old man, when we went there, when we said, we come here to help you to overcome the problems of poverty. So he was very angry by saying that, who said that I am poor? I am okay. I am okay. If I were to have a chicken, I have a lot of chicken around my house. I also fish behind my house. There is a river. I can always catch the fish. And I can even have a beef. I have a few cows behind my house. And in fact, I have no problems. Yeah, all what I need, I have. Yeah, but we were saying, actually, you don't have the money, right? You say, oh yes, I don't have the money. I don't have the money, but I don't consider myself as poor. You see now, the outsider's perception of poverty is the indicators is money, not the assets, the substance that needed by the necessity that needed by the poor, the so-called poor. That makes us to change our theory of poverty a little bit. Yeah, we need to identify the poor according to the poor's perception of themselves. This is very different from another state. Our enumerators went to a house, were also in the list of our poor list, the list of the poor people given by the authorities. And then when they reached there, they were surprised to see it was a very big house, a big bungalow, and in front there are tractors, all kinds of machines to cultivate paddy and all that. So they gave a salam, and a woman came out, and they tried to make sure, are you this by this name? And I said, yes, but you are in the list of the poor people. We see that you are rich because you are having bungalows and all these things around your house. So she was saying, yes, I am poor. All these assets belong to my husband, not to me. So my husband is rich, but I am poor. I have nothing. So this is another perceptions of the poor. Jadi in overcoming the problems of poverty, I think we should seek the opinions of the poor to allocate to position themselves whether they are poor or not. Those poor people, from our perspective, who say that they are not poor, you can just leave them a while and concentrate on the people, on the poor or on the rich who assumes that they are poor, right? So this is the identifications of the poor. And lastly, the management of poverty. We can see that there are two approaches to poverty. Number one is the top-down approach, which is initiated by the authorities, especially by policymakers, development agencies, poverty alleviation authorities, academicians, researchers, and all that. And but they are, remember, they are still outsiders. They are not the poor. Yeah. So initiated. The advantage is this. Yeah. Top-down approach has political will because it's usually initiated by the powerful, by the politicians, and then they have the power and they have the resources. So these are the advantages using the top-down approach. The other one is the bottom-up approach. This approach is initiated by the people themselves, by the masses, either via popular participation, motivated and supported by the authorities, or by self-initiated, self-reliant, independent, and also they involve fully in the decision-making process. We can see in Malaysia once, not a long time ago, we have Darul Arkam, for instance. They are trying to establish their own village with a self-contained village, they have education, they have economic system, they have their own administrative system or that in that village, but unfortunately, they were banned by the governments of Malaysia. But if we move to Thailand, you can see the Banua community in Thailand, a little community, but they try to overcome their problems of poverty by themselves, beginning with Salat, and then with establishment of mosque, with zakat, and then later on with cooperative and all that. That was quite interesting. And also, if we move to Indonesia, we can see Darul Tauhid also, a kind of dawah movement, but with full of economic activities to overcome the problems of poverty of their people. So this is bottom-up approach. When one is asking which one is good, it's quite difficult because we can see if you use a top-down approach, it is a kind of an imposition. The outsiders impose on the poor to do whatever that the outsiders are thinking is good for the poor. So sometimes the poor don't like that. All right. And then if you were to use the bottom-up approach, like what is happening in the Darul Arkam, if it is against the systems of the government, or if it is regarded as a threat to the government, and then it can be banned very easily, as opposed to probably Banao community, because they're quite in line with the government's thinking, also in Darul Tauhid in Indonesia. So they do not put a threat on the government, so they can survive, and it seems that they are quite sustainable. So there's a pro and cons using the top-down approach and bottom-up approach. But then, from my opinion, I think what is good is to combine, to have a good blendings of the top-down approach and also the bottom-up approach. So we can also think in handling the urban poverty, for instance, whether it is top-down or bottom-up approach. I think if we can combine together, that will be good, inshallah. So lastly, the conclusion is, number one, I'm trying to say that management of poverty, we have to concentrate on the management of poverty rather than on the alleviation or more over on the elimination of poverty. That's number one. Number two, I would like to pose to suggest that we have to have the poor's own perception and definition of poverty, not our own perception and definition of poverty. So try to detach ourselves a little bit, to try to understand the thinkings of the poor on themselves, and also on the poverty. Yeah. Number three, we have to reposition and also redefine the poverty and categories of the poor according to Islam. And so far, I think this is not sufficient as yet. We are not actually repositioning and redefining the poverty and also categories of the poor according to Islam. We are more influenced by the Western ethnocentric thinking. And lastly, we had to have the right blending of the top-down and bottom-up approaches. And hopefully that these four things can be used as a fundamental personal mechanism for the management of poverty, inshallah. Wallahu alam. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Shukri. Inshallah, it has been a very, very not only informative, insightful, to a certain extent provocative also, particularly when we look at things from the new perspective, the insights and also the ideas that Prof has provided us, has given us a very what you call is, I mean, this is a starting point for us to relook and revisit what we have in order to gain more insight into what we are dealing with. Thank you, Prof, on this. Actually, personally, I don't know what to summarize because what you have presented to me is clear enough, and you have brought in many issues that require, I think, reflection and also what you call this, analysis, further analysis. I think this will be the right starting point for us to deliberate further each and every issue that you have put forward. I must say that my age has been saved by many years when I listen to your presentation, mashallah. So I don't have to read lots of books. I don't have to get involved in research. I really find that we are really fortunate today to have got the gist of what you have gained over so many years and also your involvement. Thank you very much, Prof. MashaAllah. So what we are going to do now, since we still have time, about half an hour for this session, we will see whether there are questions particularly from our students in the hall. I'm not very sure whether I can hear from this side, because the hall is located quite a distance from where I am conducting this session. So let me see if the system and also the internet facility here can allow me to listen to the questions from the floor in the hall a little bit far from me now. So may I know from there, is there anybody in the hall who would like to ask? Of course, this also applies to those who are now following this session online. I would like you to also write down any questions or remarks, whatever you have, if you would like to get feedback from our speaker. Yes, so now I am opening this to our audience. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Walaikum assalam. Can you please introduce yourself? I am not able to identify yourself here. Yes, Brother Sajjad.
This is Sajjad Ahmed, PhD student, Sociology and Anthropology.
Okay, very good. Please, Brother Sajjad.
So first of all, I would like to thank our Prof for this enlightening talk. It was really exhaustive and comprehensive. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him for the knowledge and wisdom, and bless him to be a beneficial tool for the whole ummah. Ameen ya Rabb. So my question to Prof is that when we study the concept of poverty in the light of the Quran and Hadith, so we find out there are two concepts of faqr, or poverty. So on one side, we have a set of ahadith in which the poverty of faqr has been condemned. Like we have the hadith, Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Kad al-faqru an yakuna kufra," that poverty may lead a person towards disbelief. And there are the supplications. Prophet said, "Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-faqr." Oh Allah, I seek your refuge from the poverty. So when we see these, we can find out that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam condemned the concept of poverty. It has to be how can we say, managed, if not alleviated or eradicated. It has to be managed. But on the other side, we have another set of hadiths in which we find that faqr has been appreciated, it has been applauded, and it has been commended. Prophet said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Al-faqru fakhri." Faqr, poverty, is my pride. So I would like to listen from the Prof that how can we strike a compatibility between these two sets of ahadith? On one side, Prophet said, "Faqr is my pride," and on the other side, he condemned the faqr, and he sought the refuge of Allah from the faqr. So how can we strike a balance to understand these two ends of the faqr, or these two concepts of faqr? Over to Sheikh.
Okay, thank you, Brother Sajjad. Prof, would you like to hear
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Question
Yes,
first, or you want to respond straight away?
Let me respond
Okay, please. Yeah.
one by one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brother Sajat. I agree very much with you. That's why in the beginning of my speech, I was saying we have to have the fair treatments of poverty. Our writings, the writings of our Islamic scholars nowadays, that we can see that all of them are condemning the poverty. Yeah, they're commenting about this. So as you rightly say that there are hadiths who condemns, which condemn poverty, and the other one is which appreciated the poverty. So that's why we need to do a further research on this. In what kind of situation that poverty is condemned, and what kind of conditions that the poverty is being appreciated. To my knowledge, or my little knowledge, thus far, I think it is based on iman. Those people, the poor people with iman and taqwa, there is no problem with that, and until they can use the poverty as part of their advantages in the eyes of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. But as opposed to the poor who has not got any iman and taqwa, and therefore the poverty is condemned because it can entail with all kinds of disastrous effects and consequences. But however, this is my preliminary findings. I call upon all of you in Islamic University to study further on this. What is actually the position of poverty in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the eyes of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I asked the question whether poverty is selective or the poor is selective. To this extent, I conclude tentatively that actually it is selective. It is selective. There are people who has to be poor, and there are people who has to be rich. Yeah, if you give one people who are poor but without iman, they also can concentrate problem. But at the same time also, if you try to get the poor to be rich, and when they can become rich, and they also can create the problems if there is no iman. So this is very preliminary and also tentative conclusion. But I call upon all of you who are interested in poverty to study on this matter, inshallah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. If you notice, I did not give any comments after the presentation by Prof just now, because we would like to give more opportunity for others to participate. But I will give a little bit of addition to what have been presented, maybe by question, from one question to another. Yes, I can see even in the typology and also categories or categorization of the table of the categories of the poor that Professor mentioned just now. I think to me this is very interesting, and it requires more research for us to look into it, because yes, I think in reality, even ourselves, we may be able to feel and also identify as to who we are, given the parameters that are used or that can be used to redefine or revisit the definition of poverty. Instead of relying solely on the material definition of poverty, it could now be expanded to also cover the intangible one. And I think historically, as what Prof has mentioned, we could also see even in the conventional development of theories of development. For example, there seemed to be a trend that moved from the more tangible definition to more intangible definition of development and so on. That means, as a human, the nature of human being is as such that the inclination is to something that is non-material, that is spiritual, and also this. So I think it is good on this, so that when we conduct research later, maybe if not at the big scale level, micro scale level, even in our family or in this institution, IIUM, we may start to maybe distribute questionnaire to all of our students, asking them their view, whether they consider themselves as poor or what. So some might be very rich, but they don't have peace of mind, and that might reflect certain things. Or some might be poor, but they are okay. But poor and rich is also, I mean, the term that we use, but there are varying degrees of this. So I think that is good. Like Iman also, Yazid and Yangkus, maybe someone might feel he is poor now, but later rich and later poor. It could be due to the fluctuation of the spiritual attainment as well as the material factor that contribute to the overall well-being of a person. Thank you, Prof, on this, and we'll explore further in our subsequent series, as well as maybe we'll take up as the areas for our further research, inshallah. Thank you. So now, any more questions from the audience? Let me check if we have something in the chat box. Okay, Prof, this is the question from Dr. Haiza. On behalf of an anonymous student, maybe one student would like to ask this. How does the poor perceive themselves or himself or herself? Why can't we accept how the poor perceive themselves? You get the point, Prof?
Yeah.
So how does the poor perceive himself or herself, I guess?
Mhm.
Why can't we accept how the poor perceive themselves?
Right.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes, please.
As I've said just now, I told the story of the old man who refused to consider himself as poor, and the woman who refused to consider herself as rich. So I think it's good for us to see, because that indicates and also guide us to overcome their problems. That definitely for the old man, we don't have much worrying about that, about him, not much. But we are more worrying about the so-called poor woman living and marrying the rich husband. So if we were to have the allocation, so we need to put the allocations on the women more on the old man. So definitely, we need to ask, like Aziza was saying just now, we can begin from ourselves, from within our class or within our SOCA. Just honestly think of yourself whether you can be considered as poor or rich. Yeah. So that's how we do not know how the poor perceive themselves. That's how we need. I've used to do a research on the poor's perception of poverty, poor's perception of that. Then you'll be surprised to see what they think of poverty and also what they think of themselves. Why can't we accept how the poor perceive themselves? I think because we consider ourselves as more today or more brilliant than them, because you are a professor, you are a lecturer, you are students or postgraduate students of poverty, and therefore you think that you are better than them. So we refuse to accept the poor perceptions of poverty, the poor's perceptions of themselves. And so actually it relates to our own mazmumah, our own apa kita panggil, our own bad deeds, yeah, our own mazmumah, yeah. That's why when we are to be a researcher, we need to cleanse ourselves first, yeah, to cleanse ourselves and try to throw away our ego, our ujubs, yeah, our takabur and all that, and then we go to see the poor. And then, inshallah, you can perceive, you can accept the poor's perceptions of themselves, inshallah. It's quite interesting, probably. it's quite interesting to inform all of you that actually in ISTAF, in our Center of Islamic Development Studies, Development Management Studies, we are trying to venture into what we call an Islamic research methodology, rather than the conventional research methodology. So we're trying as much as possible to encourage our students to write a thesis based on an Islamic research methodology. And this is led, alhamdulillah, by our own director, Dr. Associate Professor Dr. Syed Akram Hassan. And I'm glad to see that many of our lecturers from ISTAS are also here now, and also our students. They are quite interested in this, alhamdulillah. And definitely we can always get together to collaborate on whatever that we can, inshallah. Yeah, inshallah. So this is the simple answer, yeah, inshallah.
Thank you, Prof. I certainly have this idea of visiting your center later on.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
To explore the areas for collaboration, inshallah. For your information, Prof, this Department of Sociology and Anthropology, it is placed under Kulliyyah of, now it is known as Abdul Hamid Abu Sulayman, Kulliyyah of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences. I believe the very fact that both human science and also Islamic Revealed Knowledge or Islamic studies have been put under one roof is to celebrate the desire to integrate knowledge. How the same thing, for example, society, can be seen from the two perspectives, and how can we attempt integration whereby any elements that contribute to beneficial knowledge can be further digested and see how any knowledge that is developed by human being can benefit human being in many ways. So integration is one of the four missions of this Kulliyyah. So we certainly would be more inspired by what you have presented just now. Yes, maybe one point that I want to perhaps add is that that may also explains the realities that are taking place in the world, whereby sometimes we wonder with this understanding of the new what you call this definition of poverty, if you would like to say so, there could be those who are rich, but they, I mean materially, but they are spiritually poor. And that may explain the phenomena, social phenomena, whereby we wonder sometimes reading things where people seem to have million and billion, but yet they still want to have this, and by certain ways, which might reflect certain spiritual standing on this. So I think a point for reflection for all of us as an individual, and where, and it is always necessary for us to define ourselves when and where, when we have certain thing that will define whether we are poor or rich. At the point where we want to be poor and we are having opportunity to be poor, but they will affect iman, then maybe we have to refrain ourselves from being what you call this poor, and vice versa from being rich. I think that is the underlying principle behind defining ourselves as being poor or rich. Thank you, Prof. Now we go to the next question, inshallah. Any more questions? From the chat box, I don't see any more question. Yes, is this from the venue, the hall?
We have question from the
Oh, very good. Now we can see you. Yes. Prof, you can also see many of our students there.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please. Dr. What? Who is going to ask? No? Please. From there, we can't hear you. Maybe you had to go to the restroom to speak there. Dr. Aisha, if I'm not mistaken, can't see you from a distance.
Oh, okay. Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
This is just an observation because when we talk about poverty, we have been talking a lot about poverty and especially urban poverty. But whatever it is, poverty is bad. It doesn't matter whether it is urban, whether it is rural or anywhere. But we have the tendency when we come up with programs, especially when we talk about top-down program, to blame the poor if they will not be able to get out from poverty. Just like what you mentioned earlier, it could be selective. Sometimes Allah just wants you to be poor, but that does not mean that when you are poor materially, then you are also poor spiritually. So I'm very happy with your definitions when you include together the spirituality part, the ruh part, just like what Dr. Hazizan said just now. You could be rich, but in our tradition in sociology, we always taught the students do crimes. Okay, suicide. So suicide, if you were to look at suicide, the events is always being happening to those people who are rich rather than those who are poor. So this is where the spiritual aspect, is not together with you. So living as a human being, it is not just our body which is there, but at the same time our spirituality, which has been quite absent, especially from the Western Judeo-Christian kind of position. So I'm very happy with your presentation that with this inclusion, so at least it gives us a bit of an information and we could start also from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. Prof, any response to this or feedback
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the comments. Alhamdulillah, it stimulates me to think more about poverty now. At least you have a friend who agree with me. I think most of us here agree with what we are thinking now at the moment, inshallah. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe, Prof, it is timely also for us to relate our discussion today to what is prevailing nowadays in society, whereby this mental health problems crop up due to the particular many reasons. But some people can cope well, but others cannot. And this might have been due to, of course, to many reasons. And I would also include that one of the coping mechanisms should be from our side. We cannot control the world. So when I was invited to speak on how can we retain Islamic personality in troubling world, so my conclusion is that it's up to us now whether we want to be controlled by the world or we are controlling the world. It's all in mind. You are what you think. So if you think this way, that might reduce a bit in terms of our emotion or feeling. So if we are always disturbed by whatever is taking place without having a kind of perspective, right perspective, because at the end of the day, the world will disappear. What will come is the permanent world that is in the hereafter. We may not be getting what we want in this world, but still there is what you call the opportunity for us to get fairer judgment in the hereafter. So said Muhammad Naqib al-Atas when he discussed Islamic worldview, for example, has included also this terminology, dunya akhirat thing. So yes, we are dealing with things which are dunya in nature, but don't forget that at the end of the day, we are here as to deal with the what you call this matters in preparation for the akhirat. So don't lose hope, I think, and don't despair, because yes, we have to go through all these problems, but remember that all these are having, or we have spiritual values and also reward for what we persevere in our life, inshallah. So my point here is that there are many ways of how we can cope with problems that come in, including changing the way we think about things, including being poor and being rich. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Nur Aisha Arif, for that, and also Professor Shukri for your remarks on this. We have 5 more minutes. If there is nothing, I would like to make some concluding remarks on this. I guess I don't see any new hand raised here. So let me conclude this. First of all, I will just express gratitude and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We all express this due to the opportunity that is given to us. Without his permission, we will not be able to have this very important session. He has determined for us to exchange views and ideas, and I think this is the great ni'mah that we are having today, inshallah, on this Friday, what you call this, on Friday. With regard to the presentation by Prof, I have been, all of us, I believe, have been enlightened with many new things. And these need to be further explored either on our own individual effort or departmental efforts, as well as the collaboration between our institution and department with others. And I can see bright way for us to explore collaboration between Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and also Pusat Kajian Pengurusan Pembangunan Islam, or ISDE, inshallah. One day, since I'm also coming from a state nearing USM, that is Kedah, so I will take some time to visit this, inshallah. I don't want to list down and reiterate many of the points that what Professor has presented, and only 2 points that I want to highlight here. There are many points. There is the importance of the importance for us to revisit the concepts, not only because in sociology there are so many concepts. Under development and social change theme, there are so many concepts, and including concept of poverty. And this presentation has enlightened us, give us more insights as to whether poverty needs to be seen from one perspective, or we can also see it from the different perspective. The implication would be on the way we treat and also deal with this one. And Professor has presented his view on how to manage poverty with this new or revisited definition of poverty, which is very enlightening and new to many of us. It is interesting to know that there are different circumstances whereby we have to consider the typology of poor, and also the table of describing the categories of the poor is very important, where you might be, for example, spiritually rich as well as materially rich, and this should be what we should aim for. And we might also be in a situation whereby we are spiritually rich, but materially poor, and vice versa, materially rich and what you call is spiritually poor. What we do not want is we are poor in both spirituality as well as in the material sense of the word. So if we look at the history, maybe tentatively I can see, because of what have been achieved by the previous Muslim generations, particularly Muslim scholars, who were able to contribute to the creation of the glorious Islamic civilization, where reflection of comprehensive Islam could be seen more in history rather than in our time. And therefore, I would say that Islam, when properly understood and implemented, should be leading or should lead to advancement in both sense, in material and spiritual sense. So the comprehensive development should be inspired not only by the Quran and the Sunnah, but also by what have been demonstrated by our forefathers earlier, inshallah. And lastly, I would like to say this. All of us, we are poor. Al-Faqir ilallah. We are poor before God. So we just decide whether, even if we are materially well-to-do, but if we are poor in Iman, poor in Taqwa, poor in all this kind of spiritual what I call this qualities, then I think that should be the point for ponderance. We have to ponder on this and define ourselves in that particular sense. So with this remark, I would like to once again thank Prof for your contribution, willingness, ideas, insights, and sharing of experiences. Thank also to the organizer and committees who have been involved in this, and also to all participants, those who are online as well as those who are following this session in the hall face-to-face. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide us and give us and bless this knowledge so that it will be beneficial knowledge to all of us, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.